and welcome to another episode of Tesseract Talks, the place where we put the spotlight on tech trends, startups, and VCs. I'm your host, Marko, the founder and CEO of Tesseract Analytics, and it is my pleasure today to have Kristen Kehrer as our guest, a data science expert, Mavens of Data podcast host, and author of 2 books, which we will discuss in this episode. Kristen, welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And so let's jump straight into it. You've built a career spanning data science, education, and community building through your podcasts and writing. Can you walk us through your journey? What drew you to data and what keeps you excited about this space?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. I finished a bachelor's degree in pure mathematics in 2004. And then it really became, how am I going to pay the bills? And I was always obsessed with statistics. So I went and got a master's in statistics. And my journey really began from there. So I started with econometric time series analysis and forecasting in the utilities. I spent some time in healthcare. And then the majority of my time I spent in e-commerce before going off on my own in 2019. And that's where I really had the opportunity to try my hand at the education and all the other things that I've done before becoming a podcast host.
Amazing. What trends are you seeing in data and AI that professionals and organizations should really be paying attention to right now? Are there any misconceptions about AI adoption, maybe that you'd like to clear up?
Yeah, so I think if I give my candid opinion, I feel like in, the late 2010s, we were talking about the data science unicorn and how somebody, it would be wild or rare for someone to be that person who could really work with the business, really code and understand the math and stats that was needed. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I agree that there's not a ton of them, but I think that we've overcorrected. And instead of looking for that talent that can really work with the business, we've hired project managers as someone who is in between the business and the data teams, and that can create a game of telephone. And so we end up having problems with scoping when in reality, we maybe should have been trying to improve the talent so that they have that business context and that better communication would help a lot, especially when it comes to AI as well, right? I think a lot of businesses weren't ready for, when we start building LLM use cases, it's very different. Previously, as a data scientist, I could go directly to a database, I can grab the data, I can do an analysis. And now the data that we're using, because it's text, it often comes in the format of like different documents that may live on a site somewhere. It's just working with text is different. And so now you need to communicate with the business even more. And I think that, that game of ten becomes even more of a hindrance. And in addition, there just needs to be this level of communication where, hey, like if we're trying to solve for a ton of different use cases, I need data. I need you to actually provide me this data in a way that you didn't have to before because I could just go to the database. Well, now I need you to say like, these are the correct documents. These are the ones that we're going to use. And the business actually needs to vet that. And so the way to if we can make that, communication as efficient as possible, that really helps. And also, I think that there's been a lot of questions around when we talk about, the prompting for standing up these LLMs, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding there as well, because if I'm doing something and we're saying, okay, we're creating something that's going to create communications, we want these to come out at like a 3rd grade reading level. Well, what is a 3rd grade reading level? Because an LLM isn't going to be able to tell you that because it can be defined a number of different ways. So then it comes down to, how many words should be in a sentence? How many syllables should it be? What does this, you need to like really be able to break things down, and not in all scenarios, right? Some things are simpler, but the idea of like, where does that live? Because I've worked with businesses before too, and I didn't understand how difficult it was going to be able to get the business to work with me on this in a way that was effective, where I could get that information from them. And so there's still this question of like, where does defining that really sit? How do we work together the most effectively? And like, how do we communicate our needs? And there's just this whole new level that I think the business wasn't really understood. They still sort of thought, hey, I'm going to give you a project. Here it is scoped. Go off and do it. And the level of scoping is different. And it's certainly been interesting, but I think we have a lot of things to work through. And I think that having data scientists that can truly work with the business as those unicorns that we sort of wrote off and sent them to be more tech sitting in a corner rather than like truly integrated. We need to bring that back.
Okay. And you recently co-authored Machine Learning Upgrade. What motivated you to work on this book? And what are the key takeaways you hope readers would walk away with? Maybe you can share who is also the book really for. Is it beginners, practitioners, or leaders trying to make sense of ML?
Yeah. So it's Machine Learning Upgrade, a data scientist's guide to MLOps, LLMs, and ML infrastructure. And so around 2022, I started working for Comet ML, which is in the experiment tracking space. And so I got a view into MLOps, and it was like revolutionary for me because as a data scientist, I had always sort of tracked things manually. And there was like a whole slew of issues that came with this. And so it really opened my eyes into how to, do work that was reproducible, that, saved me a ton of time with data lineage and not understanding which data file had the most recent data in it and not having to track things manually because all my parameters were now tracked. And I felt like it was difficult to share, you talk about AI on LinkedIn or you talk about the newest machine learning algorithm and it goes viral and people find that really sexy. And there are these things that I find incredibly interesting, but also improve my life and are super important. And they're not as sexy and they don't get as much traction. And so it was this idea of wanting to marry like MLOps best practices while also really saying to the data scientist, like, hey, if you've been working with tabular data your whole career, like you can work with LLMs too. Like I am super passionate about the idea that we should be working with all different data types. That's why I built the school bus detector that eventually became Suzy's school bus solution. And I just remember in, the early teens when big data became the term and it was scary. The idea, I thought it was this skill set that was like out of reach and super technical. And when you got in there, you realized that it wasn't scary. It was still data. There were some differences, but like we could query and work with that data. And I feel like this is sort of the same thing. Like for data scientists who have been doing the same thing for years, that they're not familiar with MLOps best practices, they're not familiar with working with text data. It's like, you can level up. So not, I don't want to say easily, but like the jump isn't that bad. And the reward for doing that, the skills that you can put on your resume and how you can feel empowered to work with all different types of data is like huge.
You also wrote another new book. It's Suzy's School Bus. What inspired this project and how does it tie it into your broader mission around data and education? So, what do you hope also readers, maybe even kids, take away from it?
Yeah. So again, around like 2022, I trained a computer vision model on images of the school bus passing my home. And so now every day, like when I got my kids off to school today, I was getting text alerts of the school bus passing my home so that I get a 5-minute heads up that the school bus is coming. And so it solved a practical problem in my home. And when I shared it, the community really liked the project. They were really excited about it. And I had also had these thoughts that, there's so many children's books out there that talk about what people do for work. And there wasn't really data science books or ML books about, what does a data scientist do? What does an ML engineer do? And I wanted to bring that to life. I also thought that, I've had the experience of trying to explain what I do to children and I either go down a rat hole or, it falls flat. And it was an opportunity to show like the data science pipeline in a really fun, rhyming way. And I've just had so many kids and even adults say that, like, wow, like now they sort of understand what it is that I'm doing. And really, it's like the underpinning for a lot of the AI that's coming out. And people think of AI as like, we put it in children's books and it's always just this robot that we, transplant into a book and here it is. And I wanted to demystify and really show concretely like what it is that we're doing, and it'll help people to understand sort of the limitations and what's really going on.
Oh, fascinating. And your daughter's name is, I guess, connected to the book's
Yeah,
name
yeah,
or
yeah.
not?
Yep, my daughter is Suzy, and it's Suzy's School Bus Solution, and she was, with me throughout the journey because as I'm setting up, a camera and we're using object detection, she was standing there in front of the first, camera, holding up objects and being a part of the whole thing. I have 2 kids, but my son is 3 years younger, so at the time he was a little less involved.
So is that a teaser for the second book coming up?
I do, yes, I do have plans to write a second book with him. It has to.
Well, amazing. And by the way, just for our audience, if they're interested to follow up and read more about these or get these books, where can they find it?
Yeah, so they're on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles.
Okay, great. So if you had one piece of advice for someone starting now or leveling up their career in data and AI today, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think what I wish I had when I started, there's all these books now around how to take data and present it to the business. And even just this year, Malcolm Hawker came out with a book, Data Hero. Dr. Joe Perez came out with a book, From Numbers to Narratives. And I think especially in the age of AI, right, where they're talking about AI replacing developers, and I don't think that's the case, but I do think that we will need to be able to communicate more with the business, and that's really your superpower, is being able to have influence, being able to get buy-in on projects. And so I think the thing that would have really made my career move faster is to really focus on how do I take my data skills but actually use them to influence people to get buy-in and be more effective as a data person.
Okay. And finally, what's next for you? Any upcoming projects or initiatives you're excited about?
Yeah, so I'm really excited, but this one's a little different. I'm currently spending a lot of time working on algorithmic trading, and it's so similar to data science, right? We're still getting data, we're cleaning and preparing the data, we're building an ML model based on like fundamental or historical price data, we're back testing, and then we're deploying. And so it's such a great fit for the data scientist who's looking to try a new project. And so I'm personally trying that myself. So I'm still taking on contracts, but I'm taking on a little bit less to give myself a little time to play with this.
Sounds great. And thank you so much, Kristen, for coming to the show. That was all for today. And to our audience, make sure to check out Kristen's LinkedIn page to check out the books for more details. Until next Tesseract Talks podcast episode, to our audience, stay data curious, everyone. And yeah, thanks for coming to the show, Kristen. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.